If I told you there was a free trick to gain headroom before mastering, you'd probably think I'm talking about this. All right, let's go to Isotope Audio Editor, phase rotation, boom, more headroom. Sounds great because Adam Audio, there was a mastering engineer on their channel that did that. He applied phase rotation to the whole thing indiscriminately and he got more headroom and everybody was like, wow. Even I was like, wow, but I never brought it into my process because I didn't understand it. And Matthias, who's awesome and has sent this through in good spirit, I never responded to him. And then he flagged it with me last month. And then I'm like, I still don't know. The reason why I didn't respond is because I didn't know in the first place. I'm going to get my head around this completely before making a comment. And that's this video here, me making a comment on this phase rotation and ultimately why I'm going to avoid it moving forward. I'm just going to avoid using phase rotation. I've used it a couple instances and I shouldn't say avoid it completely because there's still instances where it might be applicable, but I'm not going to blindly put it on mixes because there's a few things going on here. So I went and did my own research, Mastering Engineers Forum on Facebook, and I've taken the comments of people who I know or I've spoken with who I know are credited and have good brains behind their thinking. This is Ian Stewart, who I've had on the channel before, and here's a section of where he talks about this, which I think makes very practical and pragmatic sense. Specifically, it smears frequency content in time. Okay, now I'm going to pause there. Remember, we've got frequency content and time. Okay, two things. Frequency domain, time domain. Remember that for later. For example, a 34-degree phase shift at 20 Hz is about 4.7 milliseconds, whereas at 20 kilohertz, it's about 4.7 nanoseconds. So what's that saying is when you rotate phase, it doesn't discriminate between frequency and time. It just goes, all right, we're not going to move everything back this amount. We're rotating 34 degrees. So at 20 Hertz, that's 4.7 milliseconds. At 20 kilohertz, that's 4.7 nanoseconds. And we can see that here where we go, there's a phase angle calculation. Okay, so we'll plug in his numbers. I think it was a 34-degree phase shift at 20 Hertz is 4.7 milliseconds. And at 20 kilohertz, it's 0.0047 milliseconds. So what does that mean? Well, let's look into this a little bit more. Remember I said frequency content in time, frequency domain, time domain, okay? Fabian from TDR Labs makes good mention of audio as one of the few fields of engineering where both the frequency domain and time domain matter. So what we're looking at here, all right, on a waveform is samples across time, okay? And those samples across time build out the frequency content. Now, when you go to rotate the phase of this, it takes the time content and moves it into the frequency domain, okay? So it goes from time domain to frequency domain, and it does that through a thing called the fast Fourier transform, okay? It takes stuff from the time domain, puts it into the frequency domain, and it's there where they can place all pass or rotation and filters on it in order to create this. And what we're looking at here is still in the time domain, but something has happened which you can't visually see here because all we're seeing is samples in time, okay? Here's what I want to show you. I'm just going to undo that phase rotation. We're going to go to the spectrogram, which uses a fast Fourier transform to plot, and we're going to render this out. What's happened there? Well, now there's pre-ringing or ramping into that signal and then post-ringing. And especially because I've got this plotted in extended log, that is predominant in the low frequencies. That there is what people are talking about when it comes to transient smearing. I've heard a lot of that from other mastering engineers when it comes to this phase rotation, is that it smears transients. You've got to be careful about it with the low end specifically because those longer waveforms, in order to rotate them at a nominal degree of rotation, actually chews up more in the time domain when it goes from the frequency domain. So it starts in the time domain, goes to the frequency domain, and then it comes back to the time domain. It's shifted those by nature of this process. So what does that mean? That means basically I'm avoiding phase rotation. I haven't used it an awful lot. Okay, I've used it a couple of times to try it out and test the boundaries to see if I'm getting more headroom. But now I've actually went through the rabbit hole of looking into some commentary and understanding how this actually all takes place and what phase rotation actually means at different frequencies and function. I'm not going to be applying phase rotation indiscriminately and blindly to all my mixes. I wouldn't advise that for anybody. There are a lot of YouTube videos coming out of the woodworks where people are being like, hey, check out this hack to get more headroom. I don't think that the payoff here is worth it, especially with low frequencies when you add pre-ringing or smearing to the transients as a product of it. That's my update for you guys today. I really wanted to knock this one out of the park, and I'm really happy that I had the sync wave here to function with. I'm really happy that there was already some commentary on it to sort of pull apart. I wanted to compartmentalize that commentary into something practical. You can find this calculator. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. And also I'll leave a link to things like this video here where I go through pulse code modulation and discrete and continuous time signals and sync wave values, because that's what I used here to create that test. I'll just go back. That's a sync waveform or an offset sync waveform. And anyway, that's that. Now, if you're a long-time viewer of the channel, I've got some really cool announcements coming up next week. So you want to keep an eye out for that. And if you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, now's probably the best time to do that, because next week I'm dropping something you might want to check out. And yeah, until next time, take care.